Captain Marcus Thompson had served the royal family for 15 years. His uniform was always pristine, his posture perfect, and his dedication unwavering. At 42 years old, he had worked his way up from a junior guard to become one of the most trusted protectors of the royal children. His colleagues respected him, his superiors praised him, and the royal staff knew they could count on him for anything. The morning started like any other Tuesday at Kensington Palace. Marcus arrived at 6 in the morning, checked his equipment, and reviewed the day's schedule. Prince George, now 11 years old, had a busy day ahead with private tutoring sessions, a piano lesson, and a brief appearance at a children's charity event in the afternoon. Marcus had been assigned as George's primary protection officer for the past 3 years, and he knew the young prince's routine better than anyone. As Marcus stood guard outside the breakfast room, he couldn't help but notice how much George had grown. The boy was no longer the shy 7-year-old who used to hide behind his mother's dress. George had developed into a thoughtful, curious child who asked endless questions about everything around him. He was polite to the staff, kind to his siblings, and showed genuine interest in the people who worked at the palace. What most people didn't know about Marcus was that he came from a very different world than the one he now protected. He had grown up in a small council flat in East London with his single mother, Sarah. Money was always tight, and Marcus had watched his mother work 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and pay the rent. She cleaned offices at night and worked in a grocery store during the day, often coming home exhausted and worried about bills. Despite their struggles, Sarah had raised Marcus with strong values. She taught him to be respectful, honest, and to always help others when possible. She encouraged his dream of joining the military, even though she worried about the dangers. When Marcus was accepted into the army at 18, Sarah was proud but scared. She had never traveled outside of London, never owned a car, and had never experienced the luxury that Marcus now witnessed every day in his job. Marcus had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before joining the Royal Protection Unit. The transition from military life to royal service had been challenging, but he found purpose in protecting the family. However, lately something had been weighing on his mind. His mother's health had been declining, and her medical bills were mounting. The National Health Service covered the basics, but she needed specialized treatment that wasn't fully covered. Marcus had been using his savings to help, but it wasn't enough. That particular morning, as Marcus watched Prince George eat breakfast with his siblings, he received a text message that made his heart sink. His mother's doctor wanted to discuss urgent treatment options that afternoon. Marcus knew what that meant. More expensive treatments that his mother couldn't afford and that he was struggling to pay for. Prince George noticed that Marcus seemed distracted. The boy had always been observant, perhaps more than most adults realized. During his morning tutoring session, George kept glancing toward the door where Marcus stood. The young prince had developed a habit of checking on the people around him, a trait that his parents had encouraged as part of his future role. After the tutoring session ended, George approached Marcus with his characteristic directness. "Captain Thompson, you seem worried today. Is everything all right?" The question was simple, but it caught Marcus off guard. In all his years of service, none of the royal family members had ever asked about his personal well-being so directly. Marcus quickly composed himself and gave his standard professional response. "Everything is fine, Your Royal Highness. Thank you for asking." But George wasn't satisfied with the answer. The boy had inherited his father's ability to read people, and he could sense that something was genuinely troubling his protection officer. As they walked to George's piano lesson, the young prince continued to observe Marcus carefully. He noticed small things that others might miss, the way Marcus checked his phone more frequently than usual, the slight tension in his shoulders, and the brief moments when his professional mask seemed to slip. During the piano lesson, George made several mistakes that were unusual for him. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, gently corrected him, but George's attention kept drifting to Marcus, who stood quietly by the door. The boy was clearly more concerned about his guard than his musical performance. When the lesson ended, George made an excuse to stay behind, claiming he wanted to practice a particular piece. Mrs. Patterson left, and for a few moments George and Marcus were alone in the music room. The young prince sat at the piano bench and looked directly at Marcus. "Captain Thompson, my grandmother always says that when someone is carrying a heavy burden, it helps to share it with someone who cares. I may be young, but I do care about the people who take care of my family." George's words were spoken with a maturity that surprised Marcus. This wasn't just a curious child asking questions. This was a young man showing genuine concern for another human being. Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. In his professional training, he had been taught to maintain boundaries, to keep his personal life separate from his duties. But something about George's sincere concern touched a part of him that he had kept carefully guarded. For a moment, Marcus considered sharing his worries. But his training kicked in, and he simply thanked the prince for his concern while maintaining that everything was fine. George studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The boy seemed to understand that Marcus wasn't ready to talk, but his expression made it clear that his offer of support remained open. As they prepared to leave for the charity event, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. Prince George had shown him a level of compassion and emotional intelligence that was remarkable for someone so young. It was a glimpse into the kind of leader the boy might become someday, someone who truly cared about the people around him, regardless of their position or status. The afternoon charity event was scheduled to begin in an hour, and Marcus needed to focus on his professional duties. But as he watched Prince George interact with his siblings and the palace staff, he began to see the young royal in a completely different light. This wasn't just a privileged child living in luxury. This was a thoughtful, caring person who was being raised to understand his responsibility to others. The charity event was held at a children's hospital in central London. As their convoy arrived, Marcus noticed the usual crowd of photographers and well-wishers gathered outside. He had coordinated with the local police and hospital security to ensure everything would run smoothly. Prince George would be visiting young patients, reading stories, and helping to unveil a new play area that had been funded by royal patronage. Inside the hospital, Marcus watched as Prince George interacted with the children. The young prince had a natural ability to connect with people, especially those who were going through difficult times. He listened carefully to each child's story, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in their lives beyond their medical conditions. During one particularly touching moment, George sat with a 7-year-old girl named Emma, who was recovering from a serious operation. She had been too shy to speak at first, but George patiently drew her out of her shell by asking about her favorite books and toys. When Emma mentioned that she missed her dog, George spent 10 minutes talking with her about pets and promising that she would see her furry friend again soon. Marcus found himself deeply moved by these interactions. He had always known that the royal family took their charitable duties seriously, but seeing Prince George's genuine empathy and natural compassion was something special. The boy wasn't just going through the motions, he truly cared about each person he met. As they moved through the hospital, Marcus received another text message from his mother's doctor. The message was brief but urgent. They needed to meet that evening to discuss treatment options that couldn't wait much longer. Marcus felt his chest tighten with worry. His mother had been his anchor throughout his life, and the thought of losing her was unbearable. Prince George seemed to sense Marcus's distress again. During a brief moment when they were walking between rooms, the young prince slowed his pace and moved closer to his protection officer. "Captain Thompson," he said quietly, "I know you said everything was fine earlier, but I can see that you're really worried about something. My father always tells me that the people who work with our family are not just employees. They're part of our extended family. If there's anything troubling you, please know that you don't have to carry it alone." The sincerity in George's voice was overwhelming. Here was an 11-year-old child, surrounded by luxury and privilege, showing more genuine concern for Marcus's well-being than many adults had in his entire life. Marcus felt his professional composure beginning to crack. "Your Royal Highness," Marcus began, his voice slightly strained. "I appreciate your concern more than you know. It's just, sometimes life presents challenges that we have to face on our own." He paused, looking at the young prince's earnest face. "But thank you for caring." "It means more than you realize," George nodded thoughtfully. "My mother always says that no one should have to face their biggest challenges alone. She says that's why we have family and friends, to help carry the load when it gets too heavy for one person." The boy's wisdom was startling, and Marcus realized that Prince George was being raised with values that went far beyond royal protocol and public appearances. The rest of the hospital visit continued smoothly. But Marcus found his attention divided between his security duties and his growing emotional turmoil. He was scheduled to meet with his mother's doctor in just a few hours, and he had no idea how he was going to afford the recommended treatments. On the drive back to Kensington Palace, Prince George was unusually quiet. He stared out the window, clearly deep in thought. Marcus could see the boy's reflection in the glass, and he noticed that George kept glancing in his direction with a concerned expression. When they arrived back at the palace, George's afternoon schedule included some free time before dinner. Instead of heading to his room or joining his siblings, George asked Marcus to accompany him to the palace gardens. This was an unusual request, as the gardens were generally considered a safe space where additional security wasn't necessary. As they walked along the manicured paths, George suddenly stopped near a quiet bench surrounded by rose bushes. "Captain Thompson," he said, turning to face Marcus directly, "I want to tell you something that my grandfather taught me before he passed away. He said that true strength isn't about carrying everything by yourself. It's about knowing when to accept help from people who care about you." Marcus felt his throat tighten again. The young prince's words were hitting uncomfortably close to home. "He also told me," George continued, "that sometimes the people who take care of others forget to take care of themselves. He said that when we see someone struggling, especially someone who has been kind to us, we have a responsibility to help if we can." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a palace aide who needed to discuss George's schedule for the following day. As they spoke, Marcus stepped a few feet away to give them privacy, but his mind was racing. Prince George's words had touched something deep inside him, and he was beginning to wonder if his pride was preventing him from accepting help that might be available. When the aide left, George rejoined Marcus on the garden path. "Captain Thompson," the young prince said carefully, "I know this might be presumptuous of me, but if you ever want to talk about whatever is troubling you, I'm a good listener. My parents taught me that listening is one of the most important skills a person can have." Marcus was amazed by the boy's maturity and emotional intelligence. Here was a child who would someday be king, offering to listen to the problems of his protection officer. It was unprecedented, and it showed a level of humanity that gave Marcus hope for the future of the monarchy. "Your Royal Highness," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "you have already helped me more than you know, just by showing that you care. That means everything to someone like me." He paused, struggling with whether to share more. Sometimes the people we love face challenges that seem impossible to overcome, and we feel helpless to fix things for them. George nodded, understanding. "Is someone you love facing a difficult challenge right now?" he asked gently. Marcus took a deep breath. For the first time in his professional career, he found himself on the verge of sharing something deeply personal with a member of the royal family. The young prince's genuine concern and mature approach had created an atmosphere where such a conversation seemed not only possible, but somehow necessary. Marcus looked into Prince George's earnest eyes and made a decision that would change everything. "Yes," he said quietly, "my mother is very ill, and the treatments she needs are beyond what I can provide for her." The words came out in a rush, as if a dam had finally burst after years of holding back. George's expression grew serious, but there was no judgment in his face, only compassion. "Tell me about your mother," he said simply, settling onto the garden bench and patting the space beside him. It was such a natural human gesture that Marcus momentarily forgot about royal protocol. As Marcus sat down, he began to share stories about Sarah Thompson. He told George about how his mother had worked 2 jobs to raise him alone, how she had encouraged his dreams even when money was scarce, and how she had celebrated every one of his achievements as if he had conquered the world. He described her strength, her kindness to neighbors who had even less than they did, and her unwavering belief that good things happen to good people. "She sounds like an amazing woman," George said when Marcus finished. "She raised a son who dedicated his life to protecting others, which tells me everything I need to know about her character." The young prince paused thoughtfully. "What kind of treatment does she need?" Marcus explained that his mother had been diagnosed with a rare condition that required specialized therapy, not fully covered by the National Health Service. The private treatments that could help her were expensive, and even with his royal protection salary, Marcus couldn't afford them while still maintaining his own living expenses and helping his mother with her daily needs. How much do the treatments cost? George asked directly. The question surprised Marcus. It was so straightforward and practical, not what he would have expected from a child of such privilege. When Marcus mentioned the figure, George was quiet for a long moment. That's a lot of money, he said honestly, but it's not an impossible amount. He looked at Marcus with determination. Captain Thompson, I want to help your mother get the treatment she needs. Marcus felt his heart stop. Your Royal Highness, I couldn't possibly accept. Why not? George interrupted gently. You've protected my family for years. You've kept me safe, helped me feel secure, and always treated me with kindness and respect. You've been away from your own family countless times to make sure mine was protected. Why is it wrong for me to want to help your family now? The logic was simple but profound. Marcus struggled to find words. It's not how things are done. There are protocols, procedures. George stood up and paced a few steps, his young mind clearly working through the situation. Captain Thompson, let me ask you something. If one of my siblings or my parents was in trouble and you could help them, would you worry about protocols? Of course not, Marcus answered immediately. I would do whatever was necessary to help them. Then why should it be different when the situation is reversed? George asked. You're part of our family too, even if it's not the same kind of family relationship. My grandmother always says that the royal family exists to serve others, not the other way around. How can I serve others if I can't help someone who has served us so faithfully? Marcus was stunned by the boy's reasoning. Prince George was demonstrating a level of moral clarity and emotional maturity that was extraordinary for someone his age. But more than that, he was showing a genuine understanding of what service and leadership truly meant. I have money from my trust fund, George continued. It's meant to be used for important things, and I can't think of anything more important than helping someone I care about save someone they love. He sat back down next to Marcus. Please let me help. It would mean a lot to me to know that I could do something good for someone who has done so much good for my family. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. In 15 years of Royal Protection Service, he had never experienced anything like this moment. He had always known that the royal family was raised with strong values, but seeing Prince George demonstrate such compassion and wisdom was overwhelming. Your Royal Highness, Marcus said, his voice breaking slightly. I don't know what to say. Your kindness is beyond anything I could have imagined. You don't have to say anything, George replied. Just let me help. But I do have one condition. Marcus looked at him questioningly. I want to meet your mother someday if she's comfortable with that. I'd like to thank her for raising such a good man. At that moment, Marcus completely broke down. Years of maintaining professional composure, of keeping his personal struggles private, of carrying the weight of his mother's illness alone, it all came pouring out. He wept with relief, gratitude, and amazement at the extraordinary young person sitting beside him. Prince George didn't seem uncomfortable with Marcus's emotional response. Instead, he simply sat quietly, occasionally placing a reassuring hand on the older man's shoulder. When Marcus finally composed himself, George smiled warmly. I think we should talk to my parents about this, George said. They'll know the best way to handle everything properly. My father always says that when we want to help someone, we should do it in a way that maintains their dignity and respects their feelings. Marcus nodded, still struggling to believe what was happening. Are you sure your parents will approve of this? George laughed, and for a moment he sounded like the 11-year-old boy he was. Captain Thompson, my parents have always taught me that using our resources to help good people is exactly what we should do. They'll be proud that I recognized an opportunity to help someone who has helped us. As they walked back toward the palace, Marcus felt as if his entire world had shifted. The weight that had been pressing down on him for months was beginning to lift, replaced by a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. But more than that, he felt a profound respect and affection for Prince George that went beyond his professional duties. Your Royal Highness, Marcus said as they reached the palace doors, I want you to know that what you've done today, the kindness you've shown, it's something I'll never forget. You've not only helped my mother, you've shown me what true leadership looks like. George paused at the entrance and looked back at Marcus seriously. Captain Thompson, leadership isn't about giving orders or having power over others. It's about recognizing when you have the ability to help someone, and then actually doing it. That's what my parents have taught me, and that's the kind of king I want to be someday. That evening, Prince George approached his parents with a maturity that surprised even them. William and Catherine were in the private sitting room reviewing some official correspondence when their eldest son knocked and asked if he could speak with them about something important. Of course. "George," Catherine said, setting aside her papers. "What's on your mind?" George sat across from his parents and carefully explained the situation with Captain Thompson and his mother. He spoke with clarity and conviction, outlining not just the facts but also his reasoning for wanting to help. William and Catherine exchanged glances as their son presented his case with the thoroughness of someone much older. "I know that Captain Thompson would never ask for help himself," George concluded, "because he's too proud and too professional. But pride shouldn't prevent good people from getting help when they need it, especially when we have the ability to provide that help." William leaned forward, studying his son's face. "George, this is a very mature and compassionate response to someone's need. But helping Captain Thompson requires careful consideration of protocol and procedures. We can't simply write a personal check. There are proper channels for this sort of assistance." "I understand that, Papa," George replied. "But surely there must be a way to help him that doesn't make him feel uncomfortable or compromise his position. Captain Thompson has been like family to us. He's missed time with his own mother to protect our family. Doesn't that earn him the right to our support when he needs it?" Catherine smiled at her son's reasoning. "You're absolutely right that Captain Thompson deserves our support. He's been an exceptional member of our protection team, and more than that, he's been a positive influence on you children. The question is how to help him in a way that maintains his dignity. What if we approached it through the Royal Foundation?" William suggested. "We could create a fund for the medical needs of staff members and their families. That way, Captain Thompson wouldn't be receiving charity. He'd be accessing a benefit that's available to all our employees." George's eyes lit up. "That's perfect. It helps Captain Thompson without making him feel singled out, and it helps other people too. Could we set it up quickly enough to help his mother?" "I think we can arrange something," Catherine said. "But George, I want you to understand something important. What you've done today, recognizing someone's need and wanting to help, that's exactly the kind of leadership we hope you'll always show. But it also means taking responsibility for following through." "What do you mean?" George asked. William explained. "If we create this fund to help Captain Thompson, you'll need to stay involved. You'll need to check on his mother's progress, make sure the treatments are working, and continue to show that same level of care over time. Helping someone isn't just about solving their immediate problem. It's about maintaining that relationship and support." George nodded seriously. "I want to do that. I want to meet his mother and make sure she knows that we care about her. Not just because of Captain Thompson's work, but because she's a good person who deserves help." Over the next few days, William and Catherine worked with their private secretary and legal team to establish the Medical Assistance Fund. They moved quickly but carefully, ensuring that everything was done properly and that the fund would be sustainable for helping other staff members in the future. When they were ready, William called Captain Thompson into his office. Marcus entered nervously, unsure why he was being summoned by the Prince of Wales personally. He had been working with the family for years, but direct meetings with William were rare and usually related to security concerns. "Captain Thompson," William began, "please sit down. I want to discuss something important with you." Marcus sat stiffly, his mind racing through recent events to see if he had made any mistakes. "George spoke with us about your mother's medical situation," William continued. Marcus felt his heart sink, worried that his personal conversation with the young prince had somehow crossed a line. "Sir, I want to apologize if I spoke inappropriately with Prince George. I never intended to burden him with my personal problems, and I certainly never intended to ask for any kind of assistance." William held up a hand to stop him. "Captain Thompson, you have nothing to apologize for. In fact, Catherine and I are proud of George for recognizing someone in need and wanting to help. But more than that, we're grateful to you for the way you've influenced our son's development." Marcus looked confused. "I'm not sure I understand, sir." "The compassion and empathy that George showed you didn't come from nowhere," William explained. "Children learn those qualities by observing the adults around them. George has watched you interact with our family and staff for years. He's seen your professionalism, your kindness, and your dedication. Those observations helped shape the young man he's becoming." Catherine entered the office carrying some documents. "Captain Thompson, We've established a medical assistance fund for our staff and their families. This fund will provide support for medical expenses that aren't fully covered by standard insurance. Your mother will be the first beneficiary of this program. Marcus felt overwhelmed again.
Your Royal Highnesses, I don't know how to thank you.
This is beyond anything I could have hoped for. You don't need to thank us, William said. This fund serves an important purpose, and your situation helped us realize that we needed to have this support system in place. But there is one thing George specifically requested. What's that, sir? Catherine smiled. He would like to meet your mother if she's comfortable with that. He wants to thank her personally for raising such a dedicated man, and to let her know that her son is valued by our family. Marcus was speechless. The idea of Prince George meeting his mother in their modest council flat seemed surreal, but the genuine care behind the request was unmistakable. I think she would be honored to meet Prince George, Marcus said quietly. She's always been so proud of my work with your family. Meeting one of the children I protect would mean the world to her. Excellent, William said. We'll arrange something informal and private. George is quite insistent about this. He wants your mother to know that she's not just receiving help from an institution, but from people who genuinely care about her and appreciate what her son does for our family. As Marcus left the meeting, he felt a profound sense of gratitude and amazement. In all his years of service, he had never imagined that his relationship with the royal family could become so personal and meaningful. Prince George's simple act of compassion had not only solved his immediate problem, but had also created a lasting support system for other staff members who might face similar challenges. That evening, Marcus called his mother to share the incredible news. Sarah Thompson listened in amazement as her son described Prince George's intervention and the royal family's response. Marcus, she said when he finished, you've always told me that the royal family you work for are good people, but this proves it beyond any doubt. That young prince has a heart of gold and his parents raised him right. Mum, Marcus said, Prince George wants to meet you. He wants to thank you for raising me and to make sure you know how much the family values what I do. Sarah was quiet for a moment, overwhelmed by the honor. I'd be delighted to meet him, she finally said. I want to thank him for his kindness and tell him how proud I am of the young man he's becoming. Any child who shows that kind of compassion is going to make a wonderful king someday. The meeting between Prince George and Sarah Thompson was arranged for the following Saturday afternoon. Instead of a formal palace visit, which might have been overwhelming for Sarah, the family decided on a more intimate setting. George would visit Sarah at her home, accompanied only by Marcus and one additional security officer. Marcus spent the entire week preparing his mother for the visit. He helped her clean the small flat, though she insisted it was already spotless and worried endlessly about what to serve an 11-year-old prince for tea. Sarah had lived her entire life in modest circumstances, and the idea of entertaining royalty in her council flat seemed impossible to grasp. What does a prince eat? She asked Marcus repeatedly. Should I buy fancy biscuits? Do I need proper china? Marcus assured her that Prince George was just a normal boy who would appreciate whatever she offered. But Sarah's nervousness was endearing. On Saturday morning, George asked his parents several questions about visiting someone's home. Should I bring a gift? What should I talk about? What if I say something wrong? His parents were touched by his thoughtfulness and concern about making a good impression on Marcus's mother. Just be yourself, George, Catherine advised. Mrs. Thompson will be nervous, so your job is to help her feel comfortable. Ask her about her life, listen to her stories, and let her know how much we appreciate her son. When the day arrived, Marcus picked up Prince George from Kensington Palace in an unmarked car. During the drive to East London, George was unusually quiet, clearly thinking about the visit ahead. As they traveled from the affluent areas of West London to the working-class neighborhoods where Marcus had grown up, the contrast became obvious. Captain Thompson, George said as they drove through Marcus's old neighborhood, this is very different from where I live, isn't it? Yes, it is, Your Royal Highness, Marcus replied honestly. But different doesn't mean less important. Some of the best people I've ever known live in neighborhoods like this one. George nodded thoughtfully. My father says that a good leader needs to understand how all of his people live, not just the wealthy ones. I think this visit will help me understand that better. When they arrived at Sarah's building, Marcus could see his mother watching from her second-floor window. She had been ready for hours, wearing her best dress and having checked her appearance in the mirror countless times. Marcus's heart swelled with love and pride as he saw how much effort she had put into preparing for this moment. Sarah met them at the building entrance, her nervousness evident, but her pride in her son shining through. Marcus made the introductions carefully, following protocol while trying to keep the atmosphere relaxed. "Mrs. Thompson," Prince George said, extending his hand with perfect manners, "it's such an honor to meet you. Captain Thompson talks about you all the time, and I've been looking forward to this visit." Sarah shook his hand, clearly starstruck, but doing her best to maintain her composure. "Your Royal Highness, welcome to our home. I'm so grateful for your kindness to my son and to me." As they climbed the stairs to Sarah's flat, George asked genuine questions about the building and the neighborhood. He seemed interested in understanding how people lived in different circumstances, and his questions came from curiosity rather than judgment. Inside the small but immaculate flat, Sarah had prepared a proper tea service with her best dishes. She had made sandwiches, bought nice biscuits, and even found some flowers for the small table. The effort and care she had put into the preparation was obvious, and George was clearly moved by her hospitality. "This is lovely, Mrs. Thompson," George said as he looked around the cozy living room. "You have a beautiful home. I can see where Captain Thompson learned to take such good care of things." Sarah beamed at the compliment. As they sat down for tea, her nervousness began to fade, replaced by maternal pride as she started sharing stories about Marcus's childhood. She told George about Marcus's determination to join the military, his dedication to his studies, and his unwavering kindness to others throughout his life. Even as a little boy, Sarah said, Marcus always wanted to help people. When his friends were in trouble, they came to him. When neighbors needed assistance, he was the first to offer. I always knew he would find a way to serve others. George listened intently, asking questions about Marcus's childhood and showing genuine interest in Sarah's stories. "It sounds like he was lucky to have such a wonderful mother," George said. "The way you raised him shows in everything he does for our family." As the conversation continued, Sarah gradually relaxed completely. She began asking George questions about his own life, his interests, and his education. George answered honestly and openly, and soon they were talking like old friends rather than a prince and a working-class grandmother. "Your Royal Highness," Sarah said at one point, "I want you to know how grateful I am for what you've done for our family. The medical fund you helped create, it's going to change my life. I was so worried about the treatments I needed, and now I can focus on getting better instead of worrying about money." George looked serious. "Mrs. Thompson, I want you to know that helping you wasn't charity. Your son has protected my family for years. He's missed holidays with you, worked long hours, and always put our safety first. When I learned that you needed help, it felt like the least we could do to support someone who has supported us so much." "You're very wise for someone so young," Sarah said, patting George's hand affectionately. "Your parents have raised you well. You're going to make a wonderful king someday." "I hope so," George replied earnestly. "My parents always tell me that being royal isn't about having power over people. It's about serving them. Meeting you and hearing about your life helps me understand what that really means." Marcus watched this exchange with amazement. Here was his 11-year-old charge having a profound conversation about leadership and service with his working-class mother, and both of them were completely comfortable with each other. The natural empathy and emotional intelligence that George displayed was extraordinary. As the visit continued, George asked Sarah about her medical treatment and how she was feeling. He listened carefully to her explanations and asked thoughtful follow-up questions. When Sarah mentioned that she was nervous about starting the new therapy, George was immediately reassuring. "Mrs. Thompson, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met," he said confidently. "Anyone who raised a son like Captain Thompson and worked as hard as you have your whole life can handle whatever treatment the doctors recommend. And remember, you're not facing this alone anymore." Before they left, George asked if he could see some photos of Marcus as a child. Sarah eagerly brought out several albums, and George spent time looking through pictures of Marcus's school days, military service, and various family celebrations. He asked questions about each photo and seemed genuinely interested in understanding Marcus's background and family history. "I'd like to stay in touch with you, if that's all right," George said as they prepared to leave. "I want to know how your treatment goes, and I'd love to hear more stories about Captain Thompson when he was young." Sarah was overwhelmed by the request. "I would be honored to stay in touch, Your Royal Highness." You're welcome in our home any time." As they said their goodbyes, Sarah hugged George warmly, a gesture that might have seemed inappropriate in formal circumstances, but felt completely natural in this moment. "Thank you for being such a kind and caring young man," she whispered. "Your parents should be very proud of you." The weeks following the visit brought significant changes to everyone involved. Sarah Thompson began her specialized treatment, which showed promising results from the very beginning. The stress of worrying about medical bills had been lifted from her shoulders, allowing her to focus entirely on her recovery. She sent regular updates to Prince George through Marcus, sharing her progress and expressing her gratitude. George, meanwhile, seemed transformed by the experience. He spoke frequently with his parents about what he had learned from meeting Sarah and seeing how people lived in different circumstances. The visit had given him a deeper understanding of the challenges faced by ordinary families and had strengthened his resolve to be a leader who truly served all people. "Papa," George said one evening as they walked through the palace gardens, "I've been thinking about Mrs. Thompson and families like hers. There must be many people who work hard their whole lives but still struggle when something unexpected happens, like a serious illness." William nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that will make you a good king someday, George. Understanding the real challenges people face is the first step toward being able to help them effectively." At work, Marcus found himself in an unusual position. Word had spread discreetly among the palace staff about the new medical assistance fund, though the specific details of Marcus's situation remained private. Several colleagues approached him privately to express their gratitude for the program, sharing their own stories of family members who might benefit from such support in the future. The relationship between Marcus and Prince George had evolved into something unprecedented in Marcus's experience. While maintaining all proper protocols and professional boundaries, there was now an additional layer of mutual respect and genuine care that enriched their daily interactions. 1 month after the visit, Sarah Thompson received excellent news from her doctors. The specialized treatment was working better than expected, and her prognosis had improved significantly. When Marcus shared this news with Prince George, the young prince was visibly delighted. "Can we visit her again?" George asked immediately. "I want to see how she's doing, and I promised I'd stay in touch." Another visit was arranged, this time with Catherine joining them. The Princess of Wales wanted to meet Sarah personally and see the positive impact the medical fund was having. Sarah was even more nervous about meeting Catherine than she had been about meeting George, but her excitement was equally strong. When they arrived at Sarah's flat, she looked healthier and more energetic than she had during the first visit. The treatment was clearly helping, and her spirits were much improved. She welcomed Prince George like an old friend and was graciously honored to meet Catherine. "Mrs. Thompson," Catherine said warmly, "George has told us so much about you. He was so impressed by your strength and your kindness during his first visit." "Your Royal Highness," Sarah replied. "Your son is remarkable. He has such a kind heart and such wisdom for someone so young. You should be very proud of the young man you're raising." During this second visit, George and Sarah's friendship deepened even further. She showed him thank you cards she had received from neighbors and friends who had heard about her good fortune, and George was touched to learn how many people cared about her in the community. "Mrs. Thompson," George said, "you seem to have lots of friends who care about you. That tells me that you're just as kind to other people as you've been to Captain Thompson and to me." Sarah smiled. "I learned long ago that kindness comes back to you when you need it most. The neighbors have been bringing me meals and checking on me during my treatment. It's wonderful to know that people care." Catherine was deeply moved by the interaction between her son and Sarah. She could see how the relationship had affected George's understanding of leadership and service. After they left Sarah's flat, Catherine spoke with George about what she had observed. "George, what you've learned from Mrs. Thompson is invaluable," she said. "You've seen how dignity, strength, and kindness can exist in any circumstances. That understanding will serve you well throughout your life. However, not everyone in the royal household was entirely comfortable with the developing relationship. Some of the more traditional staff members and advisors quietly expressed concerns about protocol and the precedent being set. They worried that such personal involvement with protection staff could complicate professional relationships and create expectations among other employees. These concerns eventually reached Prince William, who called a meeting with his senior staff to address the situation directly. Marcus was asked to attend, which made him nervous about the future of his position. "I want to address some concerns that have been raised about the relationship between Prince George and Captain Thompson's family," William began. "Some of you worry that we're crossing professional boundaries and setting problematic precedents." Marcus felt his stomach drop, fearing that his career with the royal family might be ending due to the complications his situation had created. "Let me be absolutely clear," William continued. "What Prince George demonstrated was exactly the kind of leadership and compassion we hope to instill in him. Captain Thompson has served our family with distinction for years, and when he faced a family crisis, our son recognized an opportunity to help. This is precisely the kind of thinking we want to encourage." He paused, looking around the room at the assembled staff. "As for setting precedents, we've established a medical assistance fund that will help all of our employees. This isn't special treatment for one person. It's a systematic approach to supporting the people who work with us. If anything, this situation has helped us create a better, more comprehensive support system for everyone." Marcus felt a wave of relief, but William wasn't finished. "I also want to address the concern about personal relationships with staff," William said. "The royal family has always maintained that the people who work with us are not just employees. They're part of our extended family. Captain Thompson has protected our children, missed time with his own family to ensure ours was safe, and shown unwavering dedication for years. When someone shows that level of commitment to your family, you respond with loyalty and support." The meeting concluded with a clear message. The relationship between Prince George and Marcus's family was not only acceptable but exemplified the values the royal family wanted to promote. Marcus left the meeting feeling more secure in his position than ever before. That evening, Marcus received a text message from his mother. "Marcus," it read, "I had tea with Mrs. Peterson from downstairs today. She said she's been watching the news and thinks our royal family are the finest people in the world. I told her she's absolutely right. Give my love to Prince George." Marcus smiled as he read the message. His mother's simple assessment captured something important about what had happened. Through one boy's act of compassion, multiple lives had been changed for the better. A support system had been created for other families, and the bonds between people from very different worlds had been strengthened. As he prepared for another day of protecting the royal family, Marcus reflected on how much his perspective had changed. He was no longer just an employee doing a job. He was a valued member of an extended family that cared about his well-being and that of his loved ones. Prince George's gentle gesture had not only solved a crisis, but had demonstrated what true leadership and service really meant. 6 months after Prince George's first conversation with Marcus in the palace gardens, an unexpected crisis would test the strength of the bond they had formed. It began on a quiet Thursday morning when Marcus received a call that would change everything. The caller was from the Royal Protection Unit's administrative office, informing Marcus that a routine security review had raised questions about his recent personal circumstances and the assistance his family had received. While the medical fund was legitimate and proper, some senior officials were concerned about potential conflicts of interest and the appearance of impropriety. "Captain Thompson," the administrator explained, "there's been some discussion at the highest levels about whether your continued service in Prince George's protection detail is appropriate. Given the personal relationship that has developed." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. After months of feeling secure and valued, he was suddenly facing the possibility of losing not only his position, but also his close working relationship with the family he had served so faithfully. The investigation was thorough but discreet. Marcus was interviewed multiple times about his conversations with Prince George, the circumstances surrounding his mother's medical assistance, and whether he felt any conflicts between his personal gratitude and his professional duties. Throughout the process, he maintained that his loyalty and dedication to the royal family had only been strengthened by their kindness. Prince George was unaware of the investigation initially, but he quickly noticed changes in Marcus's demeanor. The captain was more formal than usual, seemed tense during their daily routines, and had lost the relaxed confidence that had characterized their interactions in recent months. "Captain Thompson," George said one afternoon after his tutoring session, "you seem worried about something again. Is your mother's treatment not going well?" Marcus struggled with how to respond. He didn't want to burden the young prince with adult concerns, but he also couldn't lie to someone who had shown him such genuine care and trust. "My mother is doing very well, Your Royal Highness," Marcus replied carefully. "The treatment has been successful and she's much healthier now. I'm dealing with some work-related matters, but nothing for you to worry about." George studied Marcus's face with the same perceptive attention he had shown months earlier. "Work-related matters about me, about us? About what happened with my mother?" The boy's intuition was remarkable, and Marcus realized he couldn't deflect the question entirely. "There are some people who think that our friendship might make it difficult for me to do my job properly," he said honestly. George's expression grew serious. "That's ridiculous. You've been protecting me better than ever since we became friends. You care more about my safety now, not less." He paused, thinking through the implications. "Are they going to make you stop being my protection officer?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "The investigation is still ongoing." That evening, Prince George went directly to his parents with this new information. His approach was more urgent than it had been during their previous conversation about Marcus's mother. "Papa, Mama," George said, finding them in their private study, "I need to talk to you about something important. Someone is trying to take Captain Thompson away from our family." William and Catherine exchanged glances. They had been aware of the investigation but had been trying to shield George from the administrative complexities while they worked to resolve the situation. "George," William said carefully, "there are some people who are concerned about whether Captain Thompson can maintain proper professional boundaries given everything that has happened." "That's completely wrong," George said with unusual firmness. "Captain Thompson is the best protection officer we've ever had. He cares about our family, which makes him better at his job, not worse. Anyone who thinks friendship makes him less professional doesn't understand what real protection means." Catherine was struck by her son's passionate defense of Marcus. "George, what makes you so certain that Captain Thompson's friendship doesn't interfere with his work?" "Because I've watched him," George replied. "He's more alert now, more careful about details, more concerned about potential problems. When someone truly cares about the people they're protecting, they work harder to keep them safe. Captain Thompson isn't just doing a job anymore. He's protecting people he loves." Over the next few days, George took it upon himself to document examples of Marcus's exceptional performance. He noted times when Marcus had spotted potential security concerns that others had missed, instances when his quick thinking had prevented problems, and moments when his genuine care for the family had led to better protection strategies. The young prince also did something unprecedented. He requested a formal meeting with the head of royal protection to present his case for Marcus's continued service. William and Catherine were initially hesitant to allow their 11-year-old son to involve himself in such adult matters, but George's determination and the validity of his arguments convinced them to support his request. The meeting took place in a formal conference room at Kensington Palace. George, accompanied by his parents, sat across from Commander Harrison, the head of royal protection, and several senior officials. The boy had prepared his remarks carefully and spoke with a maturity that surprised everyone present. "Commander Harrison," George began, "I understand that some people are concerned about Captain Thompson's ability to do his job because of the friendship between our families. I want to explain why that concern is misguided." He proceeded to present his observations about Marcus's performance, providing specific examples and demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of security procedures that impressed the officials. George argued that emotional investment in the family's well-being made Marcus more effective, not less. "Captain Thompson doesn't just protect me because it's his job," George concluded. "He protects me because he cares about me as a person. That emotional connection makes him notice things that someone who was just doing their duty might miss. It makes him think ahead, anticipate problems, and go beyond the minimum requirements." Commander Harrison was clearly moved by George's presentation, but he raised the concern that had been driving the investigation. "Your Royal Highness, the worry is that Captain Thompson might find it difficult to make objective decisions about your safety if those decisions conflicted with your personal wishes, or if they might cause you disappointment." George considered this thoughtfully. "Commander Harrison, in the past 6 months, has Captain Thompson ever failed to follow security protocols? Has he ever allowed me to do something unsafe because I wanted to do it? Has he ever put my personal feelings ahead of my safety?" "No," Harrison admitted. "His performance has been exemplary. Then the concern is theoretical, George said with logic beyond his years. Captain Thompson has proven that he can balance his personal care for our family with his professional responsibilities. He's shown that caring about someone makes you more protective of them, not less. The meeting continued for another hour, with George answering questions and addressing concerns with remarkable composure and insight. When it concluded, Commander Harrison and his team requested time to consider everything they had heard. 3 days later, Marcus was called to another meeting, this time with Commander Harrison alone. He entered the room expecting to learn his fate, prepared for either outcome but hoping for the best. Captain Thompson, Harrison began, this investigation has been unlike anything I've handled in 20 years of royal protection. We've examined your performance, interviewed your colleagues, and analyzed every aspect of your service since the medical assistant situation began. Marcus waited, his heart pounding. Our conclusion is that your personal relationship with the royal family has made you a better protection officer, not a worse one. Your dedication has increased, your attention to detail has improved, and your ability to anticipate and prevent problems has been enhanced. Prince George's presentation on your behalf was the most compelling defense of a protection officer I've ever heard. Marcus felt tears of relief welling up in his eyes. However, Harrison continued, we are implementing new guidelines for all protection officers regarding personal relationships with the royal family. These guidelines will ensure that the support systems we've created can be maintained without compromising security protocols. Thank you, sir, Marcus managed to say. I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue serving the family. Captain Thompson, Harrison said, standing to shake his hand. Prince George made it clear that he considers you family. Given your service record and his endorsement, we're honored to have you continue as part of the Royal Protection Team. When Marcus shared the news with Prince George, the young prince's reaction was characteristically mature and thoughtful. I'm glad they made the right decision, George said, but I want you to know that even if they hadn't, it wouldn't have changed how our family feels about you. You'll always be part of our family no matter what job you have. That evening, Marcus called his mother to share the good news. Sarah Thompson listened with pride and amazement as her son described Prince George's passionate defense of their friendship. Marcus, she said when he finished, that young prince fought for you the same way you've always fought for other people. He learned that loyalty and courage from watching people like you. You should be proud of the influence you've had on him. As Marcus reflected on everything that had happened, he realized that Prince George's gentle gesture of compassion had created something much larger than anyone had anticipated. It had not only solved a personal crisis and created a support system for other families, but it had also challenged traditional thinking about relationships between royalty and staff. Most importantly, it had demonstrated that true leadership comes from recognizing the humanity in others and responding with kindness and courage. Prince George had shown that caring about people doesn't make you weak or compromised. It makes you stronger and more committed to doing what's right. Marcus knew that he would serve the royal family for as long as they wanted him, not just out of professional duty, but out of genuine love and respect for people who had shown him that monarchy at its best is about service, compassion, and recognizing that every person has value and deserves dignity. The gentle gesture that had begun in a palace garden had rippled outward, touching multiple lives and proving that even small acts of kindness can have profound and lasting effects. Prince George had learned what it truly meant to lead with his heart, and Marcus had learned that sometimes the people we protect end up protecting us in return.